Folks, thanks for joining in to All the News That Matters. We just deal with news that matters here. Thank you for joining in here in Canada and US, around the world. Got some huge stories here that are just breaking. It's going to really surprise you, I think. First of all, let's look at the fact that Skate Canada, this is the official, skate organization in Canada. They do all the major sponsoring and tournaments, etc. And they've just announced that they are not going to do any events in Alberta, the province of Alberta, Canada. And the reason for that is the premier there, as regular viewers and listeners to this show would know, brought in legislation that became effective in September. And it's actually called the Fairness and Safety in Sports Act. It's Bill 29. What it's designed to do, it's to deal with the issue of transgender, and it says that, in fact, transgendered athletes should actually be able to have a league of their own. It also says that girls' sports, the only people that will be able to compete in those, in that particular all-female division is, wait for it, in fact, all-female. And that is determined by your identity at birth, not the identity you might assume later on in life. And as you know, we've always said, look, adults have the right to do whatever they want to their bodies, of course, whether that's chemically with drugs or whether it's surgically. But kids need to be protected. Under 16, these things won't be happening. And also in Alberta, they have said that in the world of sports, you can't compete against girls if you're a biological male. So that's actually been in place for a while. I've got some discussion and controversy, but what's really lit it up now is Skate Canada's decision. I've been reaching out to people and saying, listen, you need to call your member of parliament and tell them that Skate Canada should be defunded because they are promoting unfairness against girls. And that needs to stop. So keep in mind, this is just for fairness and safety in sports for girls. All you dads, this also happens to take precedence over public schools, actually private schools, and any other jurisdictions other than, of course, a league of their own. So let's see where that goes and if that's going to continue to be an issue. The other thing with that, people should know that in Alberta, matter of fact, across the country, in many community sports, for instance, I know specifically of one related to the great sport of women's rugby, and a woman who's involved in that, and this is at the community levels, and she's in her 20s, was telling me that there is a guy, or a biologically born guy, who's competing in that league, and calls himself a woman, and she says it's just gross. Rugby, of course, is a very high-level contact sport, especially when you're in what's called the scrum, and she has told me that some of her colleagues believe that he deliberately, let's say, imposes himself on the women when they're in those scrums. So anyway, it should come to a stop, but you never know. It's going to get interesting for sure. The other situation, something's just happened in Alberta, which again makes it stand out. They've just shut down what's the so-called safe consumption site, a safe consumption site at their Royal Alexandria Hospital. And what that is, as you know, over the years, despite concerns being raised by many of us, it was thought that the way you get people off of drugs is as BC does, British Columbia, provide them with the drugs, provide them with the paraphernalia. There's vending machines in Vancouver right now that you can get your paraphernalia, and then give them a place to shoot up and stay with them and accompany them, and that's going to solve the problem. It is not going to solve the problem. When we started looking at these so-called safe sites 15 years ago in Vancouver, I opposed it. And of course, people rolled their eyebrows and said, this is terrible. This is not going to, there's not going to be an increase in drug activity and drug deaths. This will reduce it. And of course, it hasn't. There's been an explosion of increase in drug-related deaths and of course, addictions. And so Alberta, again, kind of showing the way there. Now, they've said they're not just shutting down the safe consumer site at Royal Alexandria Hospital. They're actually opening there and at other places their own recovery-oriented model where they look at people recovering, getting them into recovery, and not just simply giving them the free drugs. Let's see where that's going to roll out. Well, for those of you across the country in Canada, for those of you who watch world news or watch from outside of Canada, you'll be aware that there was another, what we call in Canada, floor crossing, where a member of a parliament leaves his or her party to join another party for any number of reasons. And Michael Ma, the Chinese Canadian in Ontario, member of parliament, on the eve of the Christmas party of the two major parties, he posed for his picture, because he was still a conservative, with the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, and his wife, and a nice picture, and everybody smiling. Didn't say a thing about his defection, and then went right over and posed in a picture with Prime Minister Carney and his party joining that party. There's only one more seat now. Liberals are one seat short of majority government, so I really think it's a matter of time until somebody else crosses. However, there's been more than expected rage in Michael Ma's constituency, and people are quite rightly taking the view that if you run under one party banner and then decide later on, while you're in office, you don't want to be in that party, then you need to step down and have a by-election called. You can't just do a switch. And so that's one of the things that's raging. The other thing that's raging is there's all kinds of accusations surfacing now about his involvement, alleged, I'm using the word carefully, alleged involvement with the Communist Party of China, and that there might be some influence there. So taking a bit of heat, whether that will deter others from making the move and making the jump, we're going to have to wait and see. Well, on the U.S. side, for those of you who are, too offended with the U.S. to do any of your holidays in the United States and might be thinking of, for instance, Venezuela to go for a holiday, the U.S. government has declared that these drugs that are coming out of Venezuela in huge numbers are being labeled as weapons of mass destruction. Now, at first blush, you might chuckle and kind of laugh at that, but when you think about it, it's over 100,000 deaths related to drug-related deaths in the U.S. That's a lot of people dying. That's more than were dying in the Vietnam War. And by declaring these drugs a weapon of mass destruction, because it is killing masses of people, it gives him all kinds of ability to stop the traffic, to move in international waters. And in fact, they're going further than that. They say they're kind of building a bridge, if you would, a maritime bridge, around Venezuela. They're going to stop all shipping of oil tankers in and out of Venezuela. And they're doing this based on the fact that Venezuela is breaching the ban on countries doing business with Iran for the buying and the reselling of oil. And the U.S. is going to clamp down on that. We said yesterday I think there should be more of exposing these extreme socialist governments to the fact that they ruin their own economy. Then they ship immigrants out, allow them to leave in great numbers. And knowing that if these immigrants, one of the immigrants people might not be aware, are a recognizable boost to the economy of the country they leave, and that's because they're no more a weight on the system, health or social welfare related. And what they do when they get jobs, they send money back to their own country that they have fled to help out their friends and family, loved ones in that country. It's a significant source of revenue for these countries. And of course, mass immigration is a significant source of voter revenue for the Democrats in the U.S. In spite of all that, the walls about and things affecting illegal immigration and affecting Venezuela are continuing to go up. Along those lines, so you may have heard of Senator Eric Schmidt. He's senator in Montana, and previously he was the governor of Montana. He's being sued by the Chinese government for, hold it, brace yourself, $50 billion. He's being sued for $50 billion. Now, a lot of people won't know because the media didn't like broadcasting this, but back in 2020, when Mr. Schmidt was the governor of Montana, he actually sued China and operatives in the Wuhan area, including the Wuhan facility, where the, of course, COVID virus began to spread. He won a lawsuit. A lot of people, media hardly wanted to acknowledge it. He won a $24 billion lawsuit against the government of China, and that was on a suit that was filed back in 2020. Now it looks like the China Communist government has developed their plans enough that they're countersuing him for $50 billion. So let's see how that one folds out. In U.S., interesting to look at the stock market today in terms of a couple of moves. We see Tesla stock going up and Ford stock going up and Pfizer stock going down. So let's break that out and look at what this means, what people are sensing in the not just the investment community, but in the broader area of citizens themselves. So Ford has announced that they are dropping all or a significant amount of their funding for electric vehicles, for EVs. That's a significant drop down. That actually gave them a bump upwards in stock because more and more people and investors are seeing that really the EV, the electric vehicle mandate, has really not done anything to reduce so-called carbon emissions. And these vehicles are very expensive, of course. They have to be subsidized if people want to buy them, and batteries have to be charged. And Ford is saying they're backing down from that, and the market's responding favorably by people saying, good, you're not following a silly path, we're going to start investing in you again. So then why has Tesla gone up significantly? It took a really significant bump in the last 24 hours, and that's because the investment in those who want EVs, it's being taken for granted, that will shift over to, of course, to Tesla, and that's a big bump upwards. So two major companies, one going up, one going down, and for the same reason. Pfizer is a very negative stock price going forward, and that's because they are also, their COVID-related drugs that they developed over the last few years are increasingly less in demand. People are becoming increasingly skeptical of COVID and the vaccines, and so that's affecting Pfizer, and they've announced they're lowering their investment on anything COVID vax related. But at the same time, they've gone purchasing and they've bought a company called Metsera. Metsera is, you may know it, is one of the obesity drug companies that's doing very well, as people are finally backing away from the silly notion that there's a problem with you, you're racist or something if you talk about the dangers of obesity. And so this particular drug has been seen as effective. But the reason, so you might say, well, that should give them a boost. That should give Pfizer a boost if they're buying this company that's moving in that direction. But in fact, what Pfizer has said is we've got to clean up the books first at Metsera. They've been doing far too much spending and overspending and not staying focused on the obesity reducing drugs. So they're going to be cutting funding. I guess you could say they're going to be trimming the fat in that particular company. The regular viewers and listeners will know that you would have been the first to hear right here on Stockwell Day-to-Day News. We talked about this over a week ago in the world of movies, that Friday Night at Freddy's, I was predicting Friday Night at Freddy's, this is number 2 movie, was going to be a real box office success and would even outpace some of the larger Hollywood productions that were spending more money. And in fact, the numbers are out today. Friday Night at Freddy's, part 2, going way up, showing again, this is what we said last week, seems that horror movies are in fact being more popular even than the recent shift in popularity to family-based movies. Let's see what it does to the pizza market as the horrors take place at Freddy's Pizza Hangout. There's a thriller called Housemaid that's just coming out. And what is unique about this is that both co-stars, usually when they're announcing co-stars, and this has been ever since movies was invented, it'd either be a male or sometimes maybe just a female, or a male and female being billed as the co-stars. This is maybe one of the first times that a film at this level is being billed by 2, count them, 2 women as being the stars. And interesting again, the 2 stars are Sydney Sweeney and Amanda Seyfried. Now, you will know and you'll remember Miss Sweeney, of course, got into a ton of trouble, or so people thought, with her beautiful ad she did advertising jeans, and the punchline being it's all in the jeans. So much of the left-leaning world went completely berserk on her, even though the company that sells those jeans has gone up, American Eagle, way up in the stock market. And plus, she came back and they said, are you going to apologize? She said, no, I'm not apologizing for anything. So it surprised people that she wasn't caving into the woke crowd. And since then, of course, the movie's done very well and she's done very well. Well, Amanda Seyfried also was being pressured in the last couple months to retract something she said when Charlie Kirk was so brutally assassinated. She, first of all, had a lot of negative stuff to say about Charlie Kirk right at that point. She has said stuff early, but she really was lambasting him and accusing him of all kinds of stuff. So she got really pushed back on and saying that she should apologize for making her negative comments about Kirk right at such a disastrous time of his assassination. She pushed back. She says, no, I'm not going to. So here we have a case where two people, two stars, both who were urged to say sorry for some things they said, both pushed back, and now Hollywood, and I think this is genius, whether I agree with either the positions of those stars or not, Hollywood is realizing, you know what, Sydney Sweeney and not backing off on her ad, that's going to get us one sector of the population, and Amanda not apologizing, it will get her another whole slice of the population. So it looks like movie theaters are becoming strategic in terms of come up with a star or a movie that's going to appear to have support in discrete and distinct sectors of the viewing audience, and you might do all well. In London, coming up in London, on the 16th of December, there's going to be a menorah lighting, and this is in response to what happened in Australia, and attending that in official status are going to be members of the Jewish community, the Christian community, and, watch for it, yes, the Muslim community. I've said for some time that the only way you're going to see any kind of reduction or finality to do with getting rid of these Islamist-based killings, and I'm saying Islamist, I'm not saying Muslim, Islamist, when you add that IST, you're talking about an ideological movement, but until around the world you have the imams themselves from their mosques standing up and saying killing Jews is wrong, murdering anybody is wrong, but until you get the imam saying nobody goes to paradise for killing a Jew, nobody gets the 72 virgins for killing a Jew, and there's no more payments being made to the families of these insane murderers, until you get that happening, yes, we're going to have to keep inputting all kinds of measures to protect ourselves, but you're not going to see a drop-off in this type of activity. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. Well, in terms of talking about faith, some of you would know Jimmy Carr, a great comedian out of the UK, and he's come out with a book, again, showing that people of faith who used to be kind of quiet about their faith and they didn't want to risk pushing back or getting pushed back from mainstream media or social media, he's come out very public about his faith. And it doesn't appear to be hurting him. So once again, looks like freedom reigns if you're willing to be strong enough to speak it out. And there's a group in the U.S., they're called Christians Engaged, and what they're doing is signing up people, and they've got some courses online. It's called Voting and Praying. So they're saying do the two. They're saying Christians should be more engaged in political life as they were for 2,000 years. It's just been very recently. You've seen, sadly, hundreds and hundreds of churches backing away from the civic arena, backing away from making comments. They're telling people, and they're distributing the materials, to vote and pray. And they said that they're continuing to gain momentum. They literally have hundreds of churches joining with them in this effort. So maybe a little more prayer will get us a little better politician. I don't know. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. Bye now.